About 6 months ago, I was at a conference in Sydney and I had to do a panel discussion with 3 other people analytics leaders, and they were all female. And we had a preparatory call before the presentation, or the panel rather, and we kind of went through the normal minutiae, who's going to cover which topics, who feels comfortable covering this, the order, and so on. And then at the end of the conversation, the moderator said, "Does anyone have any questions on topics I haven't covered?" And one of the ladies quite wisely asked, I now realise in hindsight, "Will we be doing this on a stage?" And at the time I thought it was a curious question. I didn't quite get the relevance of it. But as I stand in front of you now in a Scottish manskirt, I kind of feel I know where she was coming from. But look, I'm here to talk to you about analytics and the use of data in HR. And I think it's a field of great growth and one I'm extremely proud to be involved in. But I also think it's indicative of the future of HR. And I'm a firm believer that HR organisations of the future will successfully manage 2 resources extremely effectively. The first is people, of which we have a 100+ year legacy of practice and theory and all this jazz. But the second is data. And in that regard, I think we are extremely nascent in our journey. We are starting out, and we've been very reliant on the very capable vendors that we have around us and the IT departments that support us. Now, a little story off-piste, but I was meant to do a presentation with my boss, who's the CHRO, and I had said to her, it'd be great if we had the SME and the stakeholder, a bit of a double punch. And about a week out, she had to pull out of the presentation. And I said to her, just so I can encapsulate your vibe in the presentation, I said, "Why did you employ me?" I said, "Honestly speaking, I don't think you knew what you were buying when you employed me." And I'll never forget her response. She took a moment first to laugh, because I don't think many of her colleagues ask her why she employed them. But she did say to me, "Adam, I had a data problem, and I always felt like I was last in line." She wanted a local advocate to own her issues with data within HR and elevate the level of conversation we were having in HR as professionals. Now, I know the topic of the day is the artist, but I'm a firm believer that we need to make this more of a science. Yeah, and that's why I'm here, and people that work with data. It's not to remove any of you from your jobs. To the contrary, it's to take away some of the minutiae, add a little more accuracy, add a little more direction, so you can do the things that I can't do with a piece of software. I can't empathise through software. I can't problem solve yet through software. But it gives you an opportunity to do what humans do best. This is what HR looks like for me. This is an integrated development environment, an IDE, which is short for a place where we build software. I think the face of HR is changing, and I think for the better. It is a symbiotic relationship that I am looking to build through data and people. Now, I think there's a few good reasons why we should be using data in HR, and I just want to cover some of them here today. I'm sure there are many more, but I want to call out a few in particular. Now, the first is data and analytics are extremely good at synthesizing complexity. Now, before I came back to Australia 2 and a bit years ago, I worked for a company in Germany that had 57,000 people in 66 different countries. Now, as a human being, I am pre-programmed to manage about 150 social relationships. So in a company of that size, that would mean there is only 56,850 people that I will likely never know. What could go wrong? But with data and analytics, we can synthesize that complexity, get beyond the limitations of human cognitive functioning, and start to do things that we've never done before. And I'll give you a quick example of that. I had led a project in that context in which we had taken everyone's performance objectives 2 times in the year. All of that data from 57,000 odd people. And we had analysed all of that text using NLP so that we could provide individual recommendations to any given individual on, Adam, here are the 10 people globally who are working on similar topics to you. Because when you think of a context as big as 56,000 people, 850 that I will never know, there is a massive likelihood that there's going to be a duplication of effort in that global environment. We just normally don't have the tools to distill it. But data and analytics can help us overcome that. The second beautiful thing about this whole world is we can start to personalize the work we do. So I had built a churn algorithm, an employee churn algorithm for a population in China. And the algorithm, and this is through no brilliance of mine, but rather the quality of the data, was 92% accurate. What was even better, though, is that for any given prediction of someone who was likely to leave, we could personalize the recommendation, and we could show the HR business partner that these are the reasons that Adam is likely to leave the company, and these are the factors keeping him in seat. Think about that limitation on the social relationships I can manage. Without knowing anyone in the company, I could now know them intimately through the power of data. Software development environments allow you to replicate your work. My North Star for many of the roles I've had is I need to do myself out of a job. Once I've done that, I've provided autonomy to all of my stakeholders. It's yet to happen, unfortunately. But one thing that you can do with these development environments I've shown you is essentially create recipes. I am teaching a computer to do something on my behalf. And I can get it to do that whether I'm there or not. Whether I'm asleep, whether I'm holidaying, whatever. It can run independently. I am looking to scale my efforts. And data and analytics enable us to do that. Perhaps most importantly on this screen from my perspective is that the data science world is an open source world. I can guarantee you I am not the smartest person in this room. But one of the things I love about the data science community is that people are always sharing their work. And in fact, one of the algorithms I'll show you today has been open sourced by Facebook. We are essentially benefiting from the collective intelligence of the globe, and in doing so, elevating the caliber of conversation that we're able to have in future. The final thing that I think data and analytics is particularly good for, and I will over-index on this topic today, is around quantifying value. So for the time being, I'm just going to leave it at that. Now, perhaps most importantly for you is, when should I be using data? Because I don't expect you to code, but I do expect you to think about using data in your day-to-day work. And I think there are 3 very clear calls to action when it comes to utilizing data as a HR professional. The first of which is what I call reconnaissance. Now, I started my career in the army, and they have a saying in the infantry, time in reconnaissance is seldom wasted. And that is simply about understanding the landscape in which you are operating so that you have an appreciation of all of the factors working for you and against you. More often than not, when a senior leader will come to me and say, Adam, we have a problem, in my mind, I'm thinking, says what? Where is the evidence? What data can you provide me that shows that we have an issue? And if they can't, I will go looking on their behalf. Because otherwise, it's all anecdotal, and the squeaky wheel will often get the oil. The beautiful thing about reconnaissance too is it helps you identify the levers that are at your disposal. You are essentially looking for not only the problem, but the solution in the context. And I think that leads us very nicely into the second point, and that is around building a business case. If you are going to ask people to change their behavior for whatever purpose, at least have the decency to tell them why. More importantly, in the current environment, as money becomes more expensive, there will be greater scrutiny on every ask made in an organisation for financing. at least show your stakeholders that hold the purse that I have thought through this decision on your behalf. These are the factors I've considered. This is the request. This is the amount of resource we need to make this operate longer term. This is the payback period. And more importantly, this is the return on investment. Let them know you value the money as much as the CFO does. Finally, the third thing is around measuring impact. Once you've done your reconnaissance, you've introduced a new behaviour, maybe it's a new platform, take the time to measure the impact of your work. And I'm going to give you 3 examples, we'll definitely get through 2, maybe a third, of practical demonstrations of measuring impact in organisations within a HR context. Now, I have to warn you that while the data I provide you here today is directionally correct, it is not the exact figure that came out within the context in which I was operating. So please, I trust you'll still extract value from it, but it's not entirely correct. This one's in your wheelhouse as talent acquisition professionals. What is the ROI on an employee referral program? So I joined Reese Group 2 years ago. About 2 months into my job, they introduced a paid referral program. And about 8 months down the track, if not a bit longer, the question was asked, has it had an impact? A very natural question. And here what I've applied is an algorithm called causal impact analysis. It was open sourced by Facebook. And in essence, what it's showing you on the right-hand side of the graph is the number of referrals we were getting in the deep blue line prior to the introduction of the referral program. Using the statistics, I then forecast, which is the grey line, what would have happened if we'd done nothing? Situation normal. And then we compare that to the orange line, which is what actually happened in reality. And on that basis, we can see that in this context, we had a 68% increase in paid referrals. Now, on face value, that seems like a really good result. But I can't help but look at that and ask 2 questions. So what? And now what? You know, we paid for referrals and we got them. Yeah, it kind of makes sense. But a more important question of the day was around retention. Because we had a lot of people turning over in the first 12 months of their employment. And what I wanted to do was to determine, do the people that get paid, well, do the referees rather, stick around longer than the people we recruit off the street? Now you can see from the figures here that of a cohort of 200, the retention rate at the time was, say, 57%. So we would have expected of that cohort that 114 people would have stuck around. But when we looked at the referrals, we actually had about 172 people stick around post 12 months, which was a 29% increase on that retention rate. Now, the beauty of retention and churn and turnover is that you can quantify it. Now, if we conservatively, and I stress this word conservatively, assumed that each employee turning over cost us $10,000, you know, we've got an opportunity to start quantifying the program. So the program itself, if you think a $350 referral cash card, 200 of those were paid out. That's $70,000 in cost for the program. Of our cohort of 200, we ended up saving 58 people, which was a cost avoidance of $580,000. Again, conservatively. Now, when we take our costs out of that, the net benefit is $510,000, and the ROI is in the vicinity of 700%. That is a very easy conversation to have with my CFO. But more importantly, it arms my CHRO with the ammunition she needs to go in and answer that question around, now what? Let me give you another example of this, and it's, again, in your wheelhouse as talent acquisition professionals. What's the ROI of an employee onboarding program? Traditionally very challenging, I find, to quantify the impact of learning in organisations. But again, what I ended up doing was tying it to turnover, because that is easily quantified in organisations. And what I've done here is employed a method from epidemiology, which is medical research, and it's called survival analysis. And here what I'm showing you is the survival probability, nobody died in this instance, just whether they left the organisation or not, for two populations. The blue line is those that completed the onboarding training, and the orange line is those that did not complete the onboarding training. And you can see here visually, there is clearly a distinction between the two. One thing I did find in sharing this visualization with some of my colleagues was it took a bit of explaining to get them on board. So what I ended up doing is showing the inverse of that, and this is what's called a cumulative hazard plot. How does my risk of departure increase over time if I do or do not complete the onboarding training? And people just seem to instinctively get this. But again, so what? What are we going to do with this? Now, one of the beauties of the method that I'd employed is that you can perform another extension of it called Cox regression analysis. I won't bore you with the statistics, but what I will say is that a benefit of that method is you can then say, what is the relative risk of one treatment group over another? And here what I can show you is those that don't complete the onboarding training are 3.5 times more likely to leave in the first 12 months of their employment. Again, business leaders drink this up, they get that, and they're willing to take action as a result of that. Now here are some figures similar to the last one in where we've just made more of an effort to articulate the business case. We can roughly quantify the average spend on learning and development in the organisation when we look at our LMS spend, our employee spend, and then divide it, broadly speaking, by the population size. And you can see on average, we're spending about $1,100 per employee. Now again, assuming our turnover per head is 10,000, of the employees that did the training, there were 166. Looking at the normal turnover rate, we would have expected 86 of those to leave, but only 25 did, which means we're up 61 employees or $610,000 in terms of cost avoided. When we remove our program costs, our net benefit is almost $425,000, and our ROI is 230%. My stakeholders at the senior level instinctively get these figures because these are the kind of things they are measured on daily and are expected to deliver on by shareholders. This speaks to the now what. There's an opportunity here to further invest, potentially change the program itself. This was just looking at online training. Subsequent to this, we've introduced a 3-day face-to-face event. And yesterday, I was working in that little environment I showed you, demonstrating to the organisation and my stakeholders that the people that do the face-to-face training recognise retail sales in excess of 40% higher than the people that do the online training. It just helps us create the business case and give confidence to our stakeholders that if you spend money here, you're likely to see a return on investment. I'm going to show you one last example. And this is a quick one, and it's a little out of the traditional wheelhouse. It relates to leave-taking behaviour. So here's an organisation that had a problem in that it recognised people were not taking leave in the organisation. They were accumulating a lot of personal leave, vacation leave. And this represents a risk on 2 levels. One is a financial level, because it is an unrealised liability at any point in time. The second is that it could potentially be a well-being risk for those individuals. Very tricky to work with well-being data in my experience due to privacy concerns. So instead, what I've focused on here is the financial benefit. Now, this organisation chose to introduce a behavioural intervention, a marketing campaign, encouraging people to take leave. And what we can see from this visualisation here, as we work from left to right, On the left-hand side is the leave-taking behaviour in that organisation up until that dotted vertical line. Beyond that, we have two lines. The blue line is the forecast around what we would expect to happen if we did nothing. The black line shows us what happened in reality. And using statistics, we could then quantify the benefit. This is showing us the difference on a day-by-day basis between what happened in reality and what we expected to happen. But the real kicker for me is the cumulative benefit at the bottom of the screen here, where we can see that overall in the first quarter, there was a 6.6% increase, cumulative gain, in leave-taking behaviour. 437 days, in fact. Now, we all get paid differently, unfortunately, and I can't say, well, Adam wasn't going to take leave, but he did in this instance. So instead, what I've done is just said the average cost of an employee is X. And in this instance, I put $300. Now, when we multiply that out by 437, you can see the cumulative realised benefit financially is $137,000, just a little bit over. And those figures come together again in this slide. There are the days, there's the impact, there are the dollars that we've been able to realise. The program cost was $21,500, so we've got a net benefit of close to $110,000 and an ROI of 510%. These are easy conversations to have with the business when we start using data and analytics to good effect. Look, if you leave with one thing from this presentation, and I hope you will leave with something, it is these are the 3 calls to action. When you need to do your reconnaissance, understand the problem. If you're building a business case, proposing a new form of behaviour or a new platform that you want to implement, or if you're looking to measure the impact of your work, this is when you start needing data and analytics in the HR profession. Now, naturally, I believe that the future of HR is data-driven. I think it is a symbiotic relationship. I am not looking to write any code that makes anyone redundant, but I am looking to elevate the tenor of the conversation and give professionals like you all the opportunity to do what you love doing. Now, you've been very generous to your time. Not even my wife lets me speak at her for more than 20 minutes, if that. Thank you for your attention. I flew through it. I'm sorry. It's all done.
Oh my goodness.
I should have given you a wave. I'm sorry.
I haven't got a microphone, but that's okay. Thank you very much to Adam McKinnon, everyone.
Thank you.